Hello there, welcome to Tuck and Cash. So today we are going to rate all the birds from Wingspan. And for my special guest today, we have Flan, who is a Wingspan expert and a veteran tournament player. And he has also appeared in many of my recent videos. So he's kind enough to do this with me today, and it's my pleasure. So welcome, Flan. How are you doing today?
Hello, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm good. I'm looking forward to this. I know this is something that quite a few people are interested to see, especially newer players who maybe haven't played too much of the game or haven't got that much experience with all the birds. So yeah, hopefully this is something that people can find useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about this too. That's something that we have been talk about for a long time. So I know we have a lot of birds to get into, 180 of them to be specific. So we're gonna jump straight in. But before we start, I think it's important for us to provide some context for this tier list. So for this specific tier list, I want to rate birds for their early game potential. So if you have played Wingspan for a while, you know that the value of each bird changes depending on where you are at the game. So I thought it would be interesting to make a tier list that focus on the early game potential for each bird, so that beginner can know which birds are good for early game and which are not so good. And so here we have the tiers. So we have tier S, A, B, C, D, and F. So tier S are the overpowered bird, the game-winning bird. If you have played Wingspan for a while, you probably know what are those birds. And then we have tier A, which are great birds with great brown powers. It really brings a lot of efficiency and it accelerates the tempo of your setup. These are the birds you must keep if it's in your hands, or you must grab ASAP from the tray if it show up. And then moving down, we have tier B, which are good birds with good brown power, but maybe not as good as tier A. So, but you still want to grab this if you don't have tier A birds. And then we have tier C. They are okay birds with some good utility. They might be a little bit more expensive. If they're in the tray, you might want to consider gambling and draw from the deck instead. And then we have tier D. Those are the birds that you only consider if you're really in some desperate situation. Say you have drawn multiple birds and they're all tier D and tier F, then sometimes you just have to settle with playing tier D birds. And then finally we have tier F. These are the birds that you don't want to play in early game. I mean, these are not trash birds. They might still be good for late or middle game, but they're just not good for early game. All right, we're gonna get started. So first bird, we have acorn woodpecker, which allow you to gain 1 grain from the bird feeder if there's any. What do you think?
I'd have this either in C or D. It's not a terrible bird, and I think it's always important at the start to get something in your forest and start building that up. And the woodpecker has quite a nice power in that you can choose to cache the seed or keep it yourself. So it can definitely help get more food early on. I just think the big weakness of it is it's 3 seeds. Getting that at the start can be a real challenge. Obviously, you can only keep 1 in your starting hand, so it can take 2 or 3 or even more turns to get the food you need. So. For me, I've put this in D tier. I think it's quite specific scenarios this would work, but for the most part, this isn't a bird I'd look to keep at the start.
Yeah, I was almost gonna say this is F for me because of the 3 seed. You just have to spend like at least 2 turns if you don't want to waste food to get the food to play it. But I can see that the power is okay. Being able to gain additional food from the bird feeder is nice. So I think for now we're probably gonna put it in the bottom of D tiers here.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we have the American Avocet. So it's a pink power that allow you to lay eggs in ground nests if your opponent lay eggs.
So I've got this one in C tier. It's a good bird to get early on because it can have the potential to give you those free eggs throughout the whole game.
Yeah.
So the food cost is probably what's stopping it being higher than C tier. You know, again, as with the woodpecker, those two grubs, it can be difficult. You know, sometimes the bird feeder isn't going to be set up nicely to help you get the food for that. But yeah, it's a good bird to get in your wetlands. I think certainly the more players in your game, those pink powers are even stronger. So it's definitely a bird that I would look to keep if it's in my starting hand.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. It's the food cost. You have 3 food, but the good thing is typically if you keep a grub and a grain, you can just get a grub and put this down.
Yeah.
And it's a good ping power, 6 points. It's good. So yeah, I agree. Probably at the lower end of C tier, but yeah, I can live with it being in C tier right now. All right. Next, we have the American Bittern, and so the power is for players with the fewest wetland bird get to draw 1 additional card from the deck. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean it's one of those powers where it's again quite situational. You know, if you play this too early, it can put your opponents off playing wetland birds themselves because you know, as soon as they add to their wetlands, that this just becomes an even stronger bird for you. Its strength really is the 3 different food, so actually you can quite easily keep those food at the start and get it down nice and early. And to be honest, even if you don't use the power, you can always you know, discard the egg to get that second card, so it at least unlocks that for you. So again, I've got this in C tier. I think situationally it can potentially be a B tier bird, especially if your opponents build up their wetlands quicker, so that you're the only one who benefits from this power. But again, you know, in most cases, you're probably going to be sharing that at least with 1 or 2 other players.
Yep, I think that was good. 3 food for 7 points and good power, and you can play it from your hand. So yeah, I'll put it in C tier as well. Probably above Avocet because of the brown power. You can gain extra cards. So
yeah, I think it helps you get off to a good start. You know, if you can draw more cards earlier at the start of the game, then you can really, if you're looking at more cards, it just gives you more options going forward. You know, which is, it's never a bad thing.
yeah, absolutely. All right, next we have the American Coot. So the brown power, it lets you to tug a card from your hand and then draw another one. I would say this is probably B tier for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I've got it in B tier as well. I think it's a strong bird, and it's definitely something where if you get that in your wetlands, you know, not only you tucking birds to score points, but you're then drawing other cards instead of that one. So you know, if you go and draw cards, you might not necessarily get cards you want, but you can cycle those through the coop and get points at the same time. So yeah, flexible food cost, lots of egg spots. Yeah, it's definitely a bird that you'd look to get in your wetlands as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess in general, I would say in early game or even throughout the game, tuck and draw is such a good brown power. It lets you cycle through cards. It makes points. Yeah, I think the American Coot is in B tier just because they are better tuck and draw birds that cost less food. So I would agree this is a B tier. All right, next we have American Crow. So it lets you discard 1 egg and gain 1 food from supply. This gotta be A tier. What do you think?
Yeah, I've got it in A tier. It's such a strong power, and it's 4 points for any food. It can go in any habitat. You know, generally stronger in the grasslands because that's where you're already getting eggs. So if you gain eggs, you can then use the power immediately to discard and get food, without having to go to the bird feeder. Yeah, I think the only thing stopping it from being in S tier is some of the other birds that are slightly stronger power than this, but we'll get onto those.
Yep, I agree. One food for 4 points is very good value. And in many games, I find that any birds that allow you to build up any kind of food production in the grassland is generally a good strategy because you are not only gaining points from the eggs, you're also gaining food that's essential for playing more birds. So yeah, crow definitely tier A. All right, next we have the American Goldfinch. What do you think?
I'm really sorry to say, but I think this has to go in F tier. You know, there was always going to be one that was going to go there at some point, but yeah, it's not a great bird. I think generally the white powers, especially these kinds of white powers that either give you you know, food or cards, maybe not so strong at the start of the game, and yeah, getting those 2 seeds can be so difficult. And I think in general in Wingspan, that middle row in your grasslands is your strongest row. You want to build those up with as many strong powers as possible. Especially looking at the crow that we just looked at, filling it with a bird like this that only gives you, something useful one time when you play it. It just feels like a bit of a waste of a spot.
Yeah, I want to disagree a little bit. I think my first instinct is I think goldfinch can be maybe bottom of D tier. I think in certain situation, you can still get good value of it because you get the grain, that maybe you have other birds that can take grain and you can use those to play.
Yeah, I think it's a bird that you only play in absolute desperation.
Yeah.
I think it's one where if that was in my starting hand, there'd have to be some really bad other birds for me to keep that. And again, it's not something I'd take from the tray.
Yeah.
There's bound to be other better options than this.
Yeah, I think that fit the description of tier D, which is like you play it when you're desperate. It's not like completely useless. So I'm just gonna put it in bottom D for now. All right. Next, we have the American Castrol. So it's a predator that allows you to roll dice that's not in the bird feeder for rodent. What do you think?
This is going to be another either D or F, I think.
Yeah.
There's two types of hunting birds. There's the ones that look at the deck, and there's the ones that roll the dice like this one. These ones are in almost all situations, weaker powers. I think especially at the start of the game. Generally that bird feeder, there's not going to be many dice that have been taken out of it, so you can't expect many points from it at the start. I probably bottom of D tier at best, but I would lean towards F for this.
Yeah, I think I can agree with F. It just not the brown power just doesn't help you to build up your game in round one. And it's expensive and bad hunting power. I think we can both agree this is F.
Yep.
All right, moving on. American Oyster Catcher. So this is the one where you draw the number of cards equal to player plus one, and then if you play this, you get 2 cards, and all the other player get 1 cards. What do you think?
So I've got this in B tier. I think it's definitely a strong bird, and certainly if you can get cards early, it just gives you more options going forward. The thing that maybe stops it being an A tier for me is the food cost. You can't keep the 2 grubs at the start of the game, so it stops you getting it down on that first turn. It's always going to take a turn or 2, to get the food that you need for this. But it is still a strong bird, and definitely strongest at the start of the game when you're so short of cards. So yeah, I'd put this in B tier.
Yeah, I think I can see it maybe at the bottom of B tier. Like you say, being able to get extra cards are definitely nice. And this card definitely scale with the more number of players you have in the game, because with more players, you get to see more cards and get more cards to choose from. So yeah, I think B tier, being able to get cards in early game is nice.
Definitely.
All right. Next, we have the American Redstart. So every time you activate it, you get to get any food from the bird feeder that's available in the bird feeder.
Yeah, this has to go in A tier for me.
Yeah, gotta be A tier.
Probably top of A tier really.
Oh yeah.
It's such a strong bird to get the start, because it's 2 different food. So if you have this in your hand, you can get it out straight away, and it just gives you extra food, and it's any food. We'll see there are some other similar birds to this, where you can only take a specific food. So this is just so much stronger than that, because you can take any food that there is in the bird feeder, and it just really accelerates your game. Particularly at the start of the game when you are so short on food, and it's so difficult to get more than 1 food on a turn. This is just such a strong bird to get down at the start.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this is one of the strongest bird from the Swift Start pack. You say, being able to get any food from the bird feeder, so you're not restricted, that's really strong. So essentially, if you have the Red Start in the forest, it's equivalent of having 2 birds already in the forest. You can gain 2 food without exchanging any cards. So that's just really strong and accelerate your game. So gotta be A tier. All right, next we have the American Robin, another tuck and draw birds. This gotta be A tier for me. Yeah.
This has to be A tier. Yeah, this these tuck and draw birds, particularly ones that can go in the grasslands. These are some of the strongest birds in the game. Not only are you scoring points by getting the tucked cards, but it means that you can have a slightly weaker wetlands than maybe you might otherwise get away with, because you're able to cycle through cards. So it almost doesn't matter what cards you draw from your wetlands. It doesn't matter if they're not that good, because you can tuck them behind these birds and you're getting the points. And you're seeing a lot of new cards as well. So yeah, these are such strong birds, these tuck and draw ones.
Yep, absolutely. Very strong engine building bird, and only one food, so very easy to play in the early game.
Exactly.
All right, A tier, there you go. All right, next we have the American White Pelican. So you discard one fish.
From A tier to F tier, I think, for this one. These, again, this is another category of birds. There's quite a few of these where you discard food to get tucks. I just think at the start of the game, food is such a premium that you can't be affording to give it away. I know it's 2 tuck cards, which is a lot of points in one turn to get, but it's so difficult to get food that you, at the start of the game in particular, you want to be spending that food getting more birds down so that you can start to build an engine up, and start to increase the power of each turn. So I don't think giving away food for tuck cards is something you should look to do at the start of the game.
Yeah, I think a few things too. Like two fish for 5 points is such a low value, especially for wetland. There are many birds that you can gain like 4 or 5 points from just one food. And another thing that I don't like about it is it only have one egg spot. Say you have the Pelican Town and then you lay eggs in early game, like turn 2, then you only have one spot for eggs. So it's not even a viable or like not an ideal bird to start your wetland.
No, there's not a lot going for it really. So I think F tier is the only place for it.
Yeah. But at least it's a wetland bird, so I'm going to put it above the Castro here.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right. The American Woodcock. So 9 points for 3 food, no power.
Yeah, again, it's probably a bird you'd only play if you're desperate. So for me, I put this in D tier.
Yeah.
It's not a terrible bird. It's 9 points, which is one of the stronger birds in the game in terms of point scoring. But as you said, no brown power. It's not going to actually do anything for you. I think unless maybe it fits with the first end of round goal. So maybe you're looking to get a bird in a certain habitat or eggs in a certain kind of nest. I think that can make it a slightly more viable play. But yeah, the food cost and the lack of power just is not worth getting down at the start of the game.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's in desperate situations, say if you need a forest bird, this can also kind of fit the bill. And the way I think about it is, with 3 food, if you keep a grub and a grain, you gain a grub and you play this, is 2 rounds for 9 points, so that's average 4.5 points per round or per turn. Still pretty good value. So I think desperate D tier sounds about right. All right, next we have a Hinga, another predator where you roll the dice for fish.
Yeah, so I've got this one in D tier. I think it's got similar drawbacks to the Pelican in the food cost, the limited egg spots. I think it's slightly better just because there is still an off chance you might get some points from the hunting power. So yeah, again, it's one where if I had no wetlands birds and this was the only wetland bird in the tray, I might think about drawing it, because it's so important to at least get one bird in your wetlands early so you can start drawing 2 cards a turn instead of 1. But yeah, it's not something I'd look to rely on.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Bottom of D tier, if you're desperate, you need a wetland bird. It's 6 points and you can potentially gain some point by hunting. So yeah, bottom of D tier sounds right. All right, next we have Anna's Hummingbird. So
A tier.
A tiers, yeah. I mean, it's just such a good bird. Again, it's the value. You can play anywhere. You can use any food for 4 points, and it really get you flexibility to gain food when you need them. So
yeah, I think for me, I struggle to see a situation where I don't keep this if it's in my starting hand, unless I've got like 2 S tier birds, which we'll come on to at some point. Like you said, it's flexible. It can go ideally in your grasslands, but it even works nicely in the wetlands if you can build something around that. And yeah, any food for 4 points, and it's going to give you food throughout the rest of the game. Yeah, it's a really strong bird.
Yep. And here's the question: would you prefer to have the Anna hummingbirds or the American crow?
That's a good question. I think I would probably choose the crow over the hummingbird.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's dangerous relying on the hummingbird as your food source, because every time you activate it, you're giving all of your opponent's food as well. So if that's your only food source, you're just going to be giving so much food to your opponents, whereas at least the crow is just for you. Probably the downside, obviously, is the crow is it is going to cost you eggs. But I think if you can build something nice around the crow, then those eggs shouldn't really be a problem. So yeah, it's a strong bird, the hummingbird, but maybe not quite as strong as the crow.
Yeah, I agree. With the crow, I think you also have absolute control of what food you can get. With the hummingbird, you still have to look at the bird feeder, and like you say, giving food for your opponent, could potentially help them a lot. So crow definitely give you more of that control. All right, next we have the flycatcher, the S-throated flycatcher. So when play, you lay 1 egg in each of your cavity bird. Gotta be F tier, I imagine.
Unfortunately, yeah. There's quite a few birds that are like this. Just with the different nest types, but yeah, these are really strong birds at the end of the game, and I think this is maybe a good example of where, like you said at the start of this, we can only rate these birds for their usefulness at the start of the game. If we're looking late game, then this will change a little bit. But yeah, it's at the start of the game, you're probably not going to have many other cavity nest birds, so you're really missing out on potential eggs you could get, and just the food cost. 3 food for 4 points. It's not something I'd look to play.
Yeah, it's very rarely you can get great value from this bird in early game, but potentially some good use in late game. So F tier for early game. All right, Atlantic Puffin. So you get to draw 2 bonus card and keep 1. 3 fish for 8 points and a star nest.
This is quite a difficult one for me.
Yeah.
I think these bonus card birds are generally really, really strong birds that you want to get down at some point. And with the bonus cards, there's always a dilemma of, wanting to play it early enough so that you can see the bonus cards and know what you're working towards and maybe maximize your potential from that. The 3 fish is really difficult to get at the start of the game.
Yep.
That does kind of bring it down a bit. For me, I've put it in D tier. I think it can still be useful. Again, it kind of fits with some of those other wetland birds. If it's that only wetland bird and you just need something in there, I think it can be useful. And that star nest as well. So many times you'll have that first end of round goal might be eggs in a particular nest, and if you don't have that nest, you just need something to help you qualify for it and at least get that single point. So I think it just about makes it into D tier for me. It's a step above those F tier birds.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I think I'm more thinking this of maybe I can settle with top of F tier. I think for reason kind of we discussed before is the 3 fish is hard to get, and I also don't like the 1 egg spot. I just try to remember all the games that I've played. I don't think there was any situation when I was really desperate. I still wouldn't play the puffin. So
yeah, I can only think of maybe 1 or 2 examples when I've played it in that first round. And yeah, it's the kind of bird you don't want to see it in your starting hand. You want to see it appear, in the 3rd or 4th round when you actually have enough food production to be able to play it. So yeah, I can agree with top of F tier.
All right. Next, we have the sparrow that allowed you to lay eggs on any bird.
Yeah, so I've got this in C tier.
Okay. Yeah.
It's there are a few birds like this that we'll come on to, which allow you to get extra eggs. Now at the start of the game, that's not as useful. At the start of the game, really what you want is extra cards and extra food. The eggs not so important. Obviously they score you points, but you can worry about that later in the game. I think the 2 food for 3 points is not great. And again, the egg spots. If it's giving you extra eggs to lay, but if you don't have enough egg spaces to fit those eggs, then it just feels like a bit of a waste. So yeah, for me it's C tier, but this was quite a difficult one.
Yeah, I can see it being in C tier because um, you get some good. So the brown power is good, and they also give you value in the long term. I think it's especially useful when you're in a game where you have good food production that can afford you to play a 2 food bird in the grassland for eggs. Yeah, I think maybe bottom of C tiers, but we'll see.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
they
I think
change them.
there are other birds that are similar to this that have a cheaper food cost that I would definitely rate higher than these. So
Yeah.
but yeah, we'll come on to those.
Yeah, and as we define for C tier, these are the birds that if you see in the tray, you might not grab it. You might just gamble with drawing from the deck. So that's I think this fit the bill. If I see the sparrow, like I would think like it is nice, but I don't necessarily want to grab it straight away. All right, next we have the bald eagle. So when you play, you grab all the fish from the bird feeder.
Yeah, again, this is quite similar, I think, to the puffin. Maybe
Yeah,
it's 3 difficult food to get, 1 egg space. Maybe there are a lot of fish in
Yeah.
the feeder. You can look at getting it down. But the thing that works against it is that in order to play it, you have to take some of that fish out of the feeder. So you're already sort of limiting the utility that you can get from it. So yeah, I think F tier is the only place for this bird.
Yeah, exactly. 9 points seems nice, but it doesn't help you to build your setup or the tempo. So yeah, I'll agree with F tier here. All right, the Baltimore Oriole. So when activated, all player gain a cherry from the supply. So you get a 9 points bird with star nest here. My instinct is I want to say C tier. What do you think?
A.
A?
Well, I like this bird. I think it's
Okay.
I think it's a really strong bird to get down at the start. The star nest can be so helpful for that first in the round goal. If it's a nest based one, or if you've got a nest bonus card. I think what is the difficulty with it is those 2 cherries.
Yeah.
So it only works if there's a cherry in the feeder.
Yeah.
If there isn't a cherry available, I don't think you can work with this bird because it's just too expensive to get down. So
Yeah.
I think for me it has to at least be B tier.
Yeah.
It's the kind of bird where if it's in my hand or if it's in the tray and I'm going first, I'm going to go for it. So long as there is that cherry.
Yeah, I mean, now that you mention it, and I actually remember I played this quite a few times in early game. Again, for the same reasoning that I've mentioned before, is it's 3 food, but if you have a cherry, you gain the cherry and play this, that's 9 points for 2 turns, which is very good value. And like you say, the star nest is nice. The only thing for me is it gives you cherry, which is quite specific, and sometimes, you just don't need the cherry, you need other food. So that's why I think B tier fit.
Is okay.
Okay.
I'm happy with it in B tier.
All right. All right, next we have the barn owl. So again, another predator that rolled dice for rodent. 2 rodent.
Yeah, for me, I think it's the same as the kestrel. Maybe D tier because of the flexible habitats. So if you're absolutely desperate, it can go in your forest or your wetlands. But the food cost is even worse. 2 rodents at the start of the game is so difficult, and yeah, you can't rely on that power to get your points throughout the game. So at a push, I would say bottom of D tier, but certainly no better than that.
Yeah, I think bottom of D tiers, I can agree with that. I think it's more on par with a Hinga because you have 2 food and then you have bad hunting power, but you get the flexibility of playing it in any habitat. So maybe slightly above a Hinga here.
Yeah, I can go with that.
All right, next we have the barn swallow, which is the bird another tuck and draw bird. And this time you get a star nest. So this gotta be A tier, right?
Exactly. It's like the robin, but even better because it's got that star nest, and you probably get it in the grasslands like with the robin, but it can go in the wetlands or work nicely there. But yeah, 1 food, star nest. It's It's got a decent egg space, and yeah, these tuck and draw birds, they're so strong. So
Yeah.
absolutely it has to be A tier.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite birds. Like you say, the ability to able to play in the wetland is a huge plus too, because sometimes you just need a tuck and draw bird in the wetland, or you have a wetland engine. So
exactly,
A tier. All right, next we have the bar owl. This is a predator, but you have the better hunting power. So instead of rolling the dice, you look at the deck for bird that's less than 75 centimeter.
Yeah, I've got this in B tier. I think it's a solid bird. If it's in my hand, I'll keep it. It's one food, and you can keep the rodent with your starting birds, so it's super easy to get down. And I just think getting any bird really in your forest at the start of the game is so key, because it unlocks that ability to get more food. But this has quite a decent chance of scoring points as well throughout the game. So yeah, absolutely has to be a B tier bird.
Yeah, very very good bird for early game in the forest, and like you say, potentially make more points down the road. So I can see in B tier. All right, next we have the golden eye, another pink power that allow you to get eggs in cavity nests if your opponent lay eggs.
Yeah, I think this is similar to the Avocet that we talked about earlier. Same kind of power, similar food cost, similar points and egg spaces. Also goes in the wetlands. So yeah, I don't see too much difference between these two birds. So I think C tier is where it should go.
Yep. Next we have the Bell's Vireo. So when play, you get 2 bonus cards and keep 1.
Yeah, this is quite a difficult one as well. As I mentioned about the bonus cards before, it is useful to get those early on. And it is a star nest, so that can be very helpful for bonus cards and end of round goals. For me, I've got it in D tier. I think just because of the food cost. I know grubs, are usually a bit easier to get than some other food, but it's probably not the kind of bird that I would keep from my hand or from the tray.
Yeah.
Unless I don't have any other forest birds. I just think there's a lot of other stronger forest birds you could get down than this.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, I think the way I value it is kind of similar to a woodcock. Like you get a grub, you play it, but in this case you still have to gamble whether you're gonna make any points from your bonus cards. So yeah, in desperate situation, it can be used as a substitute for forest bird, or maybe the star nest can help you score the first or second end of round goal. But in most situations, it's not the bird you need to grab immediately. So all right, next we have the belted kingfisher. So it's a pink power where if your opponent play a bird in the wetland, you get 1 fish from the supply.
Yeah, I've got this one in B tier. I think maybe towards the lower end of B tier.
Yeah.
But it's a good bird, and I think particularly these pink powers are stronger the earlier you can get them down. So yeah, I mean, this bird, even in a 1v1 scenario, your opponent is most likely going to play at least 2 or 3 wetlands birds, so it's going to get you at least 2 or 3 fish throughout the game. Star nest, 4 egg spots. It can really help with those end of round goals as well. So yeah, I think this is definitely a bird I'd look to keep from my starting hand.
Yeah, I think I'll put it a little bit maybe in the mid B tier, because thinking of all the game, I've actually seen a lot of game where the kingfisher was play in early game, and like you say, I think those 4 spots for star nest can also help a lot for end of round goals. So
yeah, definitely.
All right, the next bird is a mystery bird. It's so interesting. So I have about more than 700 hours of Wingspan lock on Steam, and this is the one bird that I've never played before, apparently, after so many games.
I think that probably tells you all you need to know about this bird.
Yeah.
If you've never played it, then it can't be a good bird.
Yeah, of so many games. So it's the Bewick's wren. So it's a migratory bird that costs, I believe, 2 grub and a grain. So it allows you to migrate to different habitat. Yeah, I just never see the value of this bird.
No, it's such a weak bird. I think there can be merit in playing some of these migratory birds at the start of the game, but it's 3 food, and it's not all different food, so you can't even play it on that first turn.
Yep.
And yeah, I think it's only 4 points as well.
Yep. Yep.
It's not even that strong of a bird in terms of point scoring. So yeah, awful bird. And actually, I think I respect you a little bit more because you haven't played it.
Thank you. It is definitely not the bird you want to play in your early game or
No.
even late game. Like yeah, like we say, we just don't see where it fit in.
No, I don't think there's any situation in the game. I think this is F tier, no matter where in the game you are.
Yeah.
It should never be played.
Yeah, it's terrible. All right, next we have the black skimmer. So you have the rolling predator. I think we talk about this. This probably go with the hinga.
Yeah, it's the same as the Ahinga. I think it's a different nest, but the food is the same, the points and the power are the same, so it functions almost identically at the start of the game. So yeah,
Yeah.
lower D tier, I think.
Yep, there you go. And then next we have the black turn. So you have a new brown power here where you draw one card, but at the end of your turn you have to discard one card. So it kind of allows you to look at one additional card so they can pick from them, and it's a star nest.
Yeah, and I think that's its real strength really. At the start of the game, you want to be looking at as many cards as possible so that you can filter through and hopefully get some of these A tier or B tier birds that we've talked about. So yeah, for me this has to go A tier. It's star nest, it's flexible food, it's it can often be the only wetland bird you really need in that first round because it just helps you cycle through so many cards. And you're almost always going to draw at least one card you don't want. So having to discard one is not normally a problem. So yeah, that absolutely has to go in A tier for me.
Yep, totally agree. And I'm putting it bottom of A tier just because compared to other birds, it generate you points or give you food. The black turn allow you to see more cards, but it doesn't generate points in the long term. So
no, and I think there are some other wetlands birds that have similar powers that are maybe slightly stronger than this. So when we get onto those, I think those will be going above the black turn.
All right. Next, we have the black vulture. So there's a pink power where if your opponent hunted successfully, you gain the food from the bird feeder.
Yeah, this is a difficult one for me. I think it has a lot of pros and cons.
Yeah.
2 points for no food.
Yeah.
That's always good at the start of the game when food is at such a premium. So if this is going to be the only forest bird you get down, it can unlock that ability to get extra food. It can be a bit of a gamble because you don't know if your opponent's going to play lots of predatory birds, so you might have that down the whole game and not get any food from it. But equally, you might have other games where actually your opponent they might have the Falconer bonus card, and so they're committing to playing lots of these predatory powers. So you can have situations where you got a lot of food from it. So I think because it's kind of got upsides and downsides. For me, I put it in C tier. It's kind of in that middle ground where there are situations where this can be a game-winning bird, and I think especially the more players there are, if you're playing in a 4 or 5 player game, absolutely this goes in B tier or possibly even A tier. But I think in most situations, it's an okay bird, and you can get some utility from it.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna put it in the top of C tier. Like you say, sometimes it can be situational, but bottom line is a forest bird, and you get 2 points for no food. And I think the value of this card comes from the fact that when your opponents see that you have a vulture, they were more likely than not to skip hunting. So you're kind of limiting the points that your opponent can potentially get. So in terms of points, you're getting kind of more than 2 points from no food. So yeah, top of C tier for me.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we have the whistling duck. So this is the one where you discard 1 grain and tuck 2 cards behind this bird.
Yeah, and this is really similar to the pelican that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And I think for a similar reason, it goes into F tier. I think you can't be affording to give away seeds at the start of the game. The food costs 2 seeds. Again, difficult to get. Only 2 points. I know it's got a lot of egg spots, but 2 points is not great. And yeah, you can't be affording to give away those seeds early in the game. You should be using that to get down other birds and build up your engine.
Yeah, I agree. 2 points for 2 food, and yeah, you're probably, even if you try, you're not gonna activate it that many times. And
No.
I think in early game, here's another way to think about it. In early game, one grain probably worth more than 2 points. So
Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
I'd rather, even if I had this bird and I had the grain and activated my wetlands, I'd rather keep the grain. I'd rather keep that because that's going to help me get down more birds. Like you say, you don't really need the points at the start of the game. You need the food and the cards, and that's going to help you unlock more points as the game goes on.
All right, F tier it is. All right, next we have the Magpie. So it's another pink power similar to the Black Voucher, where you gain the food from the bird feeder if your opponent hunted successfully.
Yeah, and I think it's like the vulture, except probably worse, I would
Yeah.
say. It's the star nest is good, and for me, I would say the star nest is probably what keeps it out of F tier.
Okay.
It's any two food as well, so it has that going for it. It is easy to get down, but the fact it goes in the grasslands, it's not the kind of engine building bird you'd look to build. So
Yeah.
for me, bottom of D tier, not quite F tier.
All right. Yeah, I agree. 2 food for not really an engine building bird in grassland
No.
is not what you need in the early games. So,
Not at all.
all right. Next, we have the famous black chin hummingbird. It's similar to the hummingbird but instead of picking any food from the bird feeder, all players just gain a cherry from the supply.
It's everyone's third favorite hummingbird. Yeah, I think this isn't a terrible bird.
Yeah.
I think it's a good sort of filler bird. It can go anywhere. It can have any food. I think definitely B tier for this.
Yeah.
It's similar to the Oriole that we talked about in that it does give cherries. It's maybe not as good because it hasn't got the star nest, and it's not going to be worth as many points. But equally, it's slightly better because it can go in any habitat. So there's things going for it and against it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's certainly the weaker of the 3 hummingbirds. So
Right.
I think B tier is fair.
Yeah, I think mid B tier. And again, I think the ability to go in any habitat is important because in the early game, you really want to set up where you have birds in the forest to gain food, and you also need birds in the wetland to gain card. And this can be a filler bird that help you to achieve that.
Yeah.
All right, next we have the night heron. So this allows you to discard 1 egg from another bird to gain 1 food from the supply.
Yeah, this is quite a difficult bird to rank because it is so situational. I think there are situations where if you have other birds that pair nicely with it in the wetlands, this could be a high B or even in A tier.
Yeah.
But in most situations, it's just you're not going to get that much utility out of the power because it's discarding eggs from your wetlands. But whenever you activate your wetlands, you're not actively gaining eggs. So you can find so many times when you either don't want to or can't activate this power. It is 9 points. It is 3 different food, so it has that going for it. I think it's one of those I would play it if I had to, if I didn't have any other wetlands birds. So yeah, I think low C, high D is probably where I would put it.
Yeah, I can live with bottom of C tier because of the 3 food 9 points. So if you compare that to the woodcock, at least you get some brown power that you can use in certain situations. So yep, I think bottom of C tier makes sense. Right, next we have the Stilt, which allow you to draw 2 cards either from the deck or the tray for 2 grub in the wetland.
And I think that's a good point. That's probably the crucial point about this bird that you mentioned. I would say it's quite similar to the oyster catcher that we talked about before. It's the same food cost, goes in the wetlands, lets you gain 2 cards. I think the Stilt is probably slightly stronger than the oyster catcher because if there are birds in the tray that you like, you can take those. Obviously with the oyster catcher you have to draw from the deck. But then again, there are situations where actually there's nothing useful in the tray.
Yeah.
And so the oyster catcher can be better because you're looking at so many more cards from the deck and sort of picking the best ones. But I would say in most situations, I would prefer the stilt to the oyster catcher, but they are very similar birds.
Yeah, they're similar. And yeah, like you say, the difference is also whether you're giving your opponent free cards or
Yeah.
not. So, yep, bottom of B. All right, next we have the blue grosbeak.
You've actually played this one.
I actually play this one. I don't know if I'm proud of this, but you know, it happens. So I think we
I'll let
talked
you
about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
3
yeah.
food for migratory bird. Definitely not one
Yeah.
you play in.
No, it's the same as the wren. It functions almost identically. Yeah, not a bird I'd like to play.
Yeah, if you're in the situation where the grosbeak or the beweek's wren is your best option, I think you're better off just gambling by drawing from the deck or something. It's just not worth it.
I think you're better off just turning off your PC and going and doing something else, to be honest.
Just give up right away.
Yep.
All right, next we have the blue jay. So it's the bird that allow you to get a grain from the bird feeder if it's available. So you have to have a grain in the bird feeder to gain it. I want to say...
I quite like this bird. I
Mhm.
quite like it. I'll let you pick a tier first, and then I'll tell you if I disagree with it.
I think it gotta be like, you know, mid to bottom of B tier. I must say I did not really see the value of this bird like when I first started playing Wingspan, because when I saw this I was like, 2 food for 3 points and you're not guaranteed a seed. It's kind of sketch, but over time I start to appreciate the ability of having one bird in the forest and still get 2 food. So it's mid to bottom of B tier for me.
Yeah, I think it has to go in B tier. I think it is useful because it helps unlock that extra food, and you could easily get it down on your first turn because of the food cost. I tend to not worry too much about point value of these kinds of birds.
Right.
You know, we've talked about birds like the barn swallow and the robin. They're only worth 1 point, but they still go in A tier because just the value of their brown power sort of outweighs that. So yeah, I think blue jay's good. I think it works well on its own in the forest, but equally if you go for building up your engine in the forest, you can actually switch this power and cache the food instead of gaining it, so it actually will score you points. So yeah, I think this is a good flexible bird to have.
Yeah, a very good bird for B tier. All right, next we have the blue-gray net catcher. So you get a grub from the supply every time you activate it.
Yeah, and I think this is almost a perfect example of what I was just saying. You know, it's only one point for 1 food, but it is such a strong power. It's going to get you free grubs all throughout the game. For me, this has to go in A tier.
Yeah.
This is one of the strongest forest birds to get down on your first turn, because you'll find that so many birds are going to take those grubs. So we talked about the oriole and the hummingbird that only give you cherries. Not quite as useful because that's quite a specific food that not many birds eat, but yeah, so many birds eat grubs, so you won't have any problem using up the grubs that you get from this.
Yeah, I mean, the gnatcatcher, definitely one of those birds that I've seen in many games. If it's in the tray, it's one of those birds that people would just grab it immediately.
Yeah.
I would say the only thing for me that doesn't make it to the top of A tier is it is a 1 point bird after all. So if it's not from your hand, if you're grabbing from the tray and play it, it's very slow, but yeah. But I think the extra grub that you gain kind of compensate for that.
Yeah, it's slightly weaker than the red star in the sense that it's not worth as many points and you're restricted to just grubs rather than any food from the feeder. But yeah, I think 1 food, it's so easy to get down, and it can really help you build up your engine much quicker with all that extra food.
Yep, so next we have the blue wing warbler, 2 grub for 8 points, no power.
Yeah, I think this goes in a similar area to the woodcock.
Yep.
I think it fulfills a similar sort of power. Obviously, no power at all. Lots of points for a couple of grubs, and it can go in the forest or the grasslands. But yeah, it's not an early game bird.
In Desperate, if you need a forest bird, the warbler can help it. Not ideal. Alright, boboling. So another white power where when play, you get to lay 1 egg in each of your ground nests. So I think we talk about this. This should go to
F tier.
F tier.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's the same as the flycatcher,
Yeah.
just with a different nest. So yeah, it's not an early game bird really.
All right, next we have a controversial one coming up. It's the
It's probably the most
brand.
opinionated. Everyone's got an opinion on the brand. Some people love it, some people hate it.
Absolutely. It's the
For
one.
me,
Yeah.
B tier.
B
Brand
tier.
is always B tier, no matter the question. It has to go B tier. I think it's. We could probably have a whole video just talking about the brand
Yeah.
and situations where it's good and situations where it's not.
Yeah.
It's so strong getting those cards early. I think if you can get the brand down turn 1,
Mm-hmm.
and even if just one of the cards in the tray is good, you can always use the other ones for tucking or for discarding your forest for extra food. But just the ability to gain 3 cards, there's not many birds that allow you to gain so much in one turn at the start. It obviously does have its drawbacks, but it's a strong bird that I would keep. I think in most situations, unless I had an A tier wetland bird.
Yeah. I think you nail it. I think the biggest thing for me for brand is, it's kind of situational. Sometimes you just don't have good birds in the tray that you want to pick up. So I think the ability to kind of limit that. If it allows you to draw blind from the deck, I think it will bump it up a little bit. But if it's limited to the tray, it's kind of situational. And then the biggest thing about brand is you always get the anxiety when you play the brand because you never know what birds is going to show up after you take the 3 birds from the tray. So
Exactly. Yeah. You find more often than not, as soon as you take a bird from the tray, it will get replaced with a better one.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You play the brand, it is a risk because you give the player after you a fresh new tray, 3 new cards come up, and they could be stronger birds. You just don't know.
Yeah, and early game, like being able to see new tray is such a advantage. So mid B tier, I would say probably.
Yeah, I'd put it above the stilt and the oyster catcher for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, there you go, Brand. We settled the argument.
Finally, we don't have to discuss this anymore.
Yes,
it's in B tier.
This is final. B tier is brand. It's even in the names. B for brand.
Exactly. Yeah, B for brand.
All right, Brewer's Cowbird. Brewer's Blackbird. So this is the one where it allows you to tuck a card from your hand to lay 1 eggs.
Yeah, and this can be a really strong bird. It pairs well with birds that give you more cards. But for me, at the start of the game, your card supply is just so limited that you can't really afford to be, tucking cards for eggs. So, for me, it goes in D tier.
Okay.
I don't think it deserves better than that.
Yeah.
But it's certainly stronger than a lot of those birds we've got in F tier. So I think D tier is fair.
Yeah, bottom of D tier for me, definitely.
Yeah.
Again, not the power that you need in early game. Unless you have a really strong cards engine going. But once you put it down, it has some utility maybe down the road. So yeah, I can see it in D tier. All right, next we have the Broad-winged Hawk, another predator that roll the dice. So I think this gotta be similar to the owl, but maybe worse.
I'd put it slightly below the owl.
Yeah.
It's still 1 rodent. It's one more point, sorry. It's 4 rather than 3, but the power is slightly weaker. So especially early game, and you're going to be activating a lot, I would say that the owl would get more points from the tucks than this hawk could get from its reroll. So yeah, I think it's a solid forest bird. 4 points for 1 food, but yeah, maybe not quite as good as the owl.
Yeah, mid B tier. All right, next we have the Bronze Cowbird. So this is the pink power where you get a free egg in bonus when your opponents lay eggs. I think this differentiates from the Goldeneye and the Avocet in the fact that it only costs 2 food. So what do you think? I think maybe like above those 2 birds, but at the same time it's a grassland bird, so it's not as useful.
Yeah, I think you've nailed the main points there. Really, it's stronger because it's less food, but it's weaker because it goes in your grassland. And I think the strength of the Avocet and the Goldeneye is that that can be your first wetland bird, and it unlocks the ability to draw extra cards. This doesn't really get you anything additional in the grasslands other than those eggs. So yeah, I think C tier, and yeah, probably slightly below the other two pink laying birds.
Yeah, and then I guess another important points to make about this pink egg laying power is that you need to have another bird with that nest to
Yes.
get the free eggs. So
Yeah.
that's something that you have to kind of plan for too. And it's kind of hard. For example, if you think about the golden eye and the avocet, you already need 3 food to play those bird, and then you still need food to play another bird with that specific nest type to get the free eggs. So it definitely takes quite a few turns to set up.
Yeah, I think C tier for that reason. I think it's not a terrible bird, but yeah, you kind of you need something to work with it with the nest type, so that's not always easy.
Yep. So next we have the brown pelican. So you play it with 2 fish, but then you gain 3 fishes back. So I think
Yeah.
this gotta go similar to the goldfinch, but maybe above because you can play it in the wetland.
Yeah, I think definitely the same tier. I think it definitely goes in D tier. You're right. I think it's slightly stronger because it can go in that wetlands, and it gives you fish, which is normally harder to get than grain. So I think for those reasons it is just maybe slightly better than the goldfinch. But yeah, I think D tier is fair for this bird.
All right, brown-headed cowbird. So same pink power as the bronze cowbird, but it only costs 1 grain. So I think because of the 1 food cost, I want to put it a little bit higher, like maybe like mid C tier.
Yeah, I would agree that it's the stronger of the 2 cowbirds early game because of the difference in food cost. It's 2 less points, but it is 1 less food, and I think, as we've discussed before, you'd rather have that food than the 2 points at the start of the game. So yeah, I think middle of C tier is fair for that.
All right. Next, we have the boring owl, another predator that roll dice for rodent, but you have a star nest.
Yeah, and for that reason, it's almost identical to the kestrel. Same food cost, same habitat, same power, but it has got the star nest and it has got more spots. So for me, that just about gets it into D tier. I think bottom end of D tier.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be useful, particularly if that first end of round relates to eggs in a certain nest.
Yeah.
Those 4 spots in a star nest can be so strong, and if it helps you win that first end of round goal, that's a 4-point boost. So it just makes that bird even stronger.
Yeah, I think, yeah, bottom of D tier. I think it's kind of similar to Brewer's Blackbird, where it's not the bird that you really need in early game, but you might get some value later, or you might get points from end of round goals. But yeah,
for sure.
All right, next we have bush tit. So you get to tuck a card from your hand and lay eggs. I think the distincting things about bush tit is you have star nest and you have 5 egg spots.
Yeah, and that for sure makes it stronger than the blackbird. It's got the star nest, more egg spots, and it can go in the wetlands as well as the grasslands. So it's got that flexibility. It is only 2 points for 2 food, which is a bit weaker. This is a difficult one for me. I went back and forth between A and B a lot with the bush tit. I enjoy a good wetlands engine, and I think a bush tit is so key to getting a good wetlands engine.
Right.
But that's not always the right option. So
right.
For me, I've got it at the top of B tier, but I think it could easily go in A tier as well.
Yeah, I can see, yeah, either top or I think it's more of a medium of B tier for me. Like you say, I think being able to start a wetland engine here is good, but even if you are not committed to a wetland engine, having a tuck and lay eggs bird in the wetland means that you can afford to draw cards a few more times without worrying about losing too many points, because you can always tuck the cards that are not good and convert them into 2 points. So but at the same time, if you don't have other birds to support it, just the bush tit itself might not have the best utility. So but the star nest is nice. I think I kind of want to put it in middle of B tier.
Okay, I can go along with that. I think you're right. It needs support. It's not going to function as a wetlands bird on its own. I think it needs something else to go with it. But you're right. You're going to draw lots of cards during the game. You're not going to want to play all of them. So I think having the option of tucking and getting an egg as well is always welcome.
Yeah, I think in real game, what I've seen is that some people would just grab bush tit immediately if they see it in the tray. For me, it's more situational, so I can see why the dilemma of, putting this in between A or B tiers. I guess
it's right. It's situational. I think I'd keep it if it was in my hand. I wouldn't necessarily jump to taking it from the tray unless I have other birds that work well with it from my starting hand.
All right. Next, we have the California Condor. You get 2 bonus cards, draw 2, but keep 1. But it's free.
This is good. This is going to be a contentious one, I know, because I know you're a huge fan of the condor.
I do like a good condor.
I really don't like this bird.
I mean, even if you don't like it, you have to say that it got to be top of C tier if you look at the black voucher here.
Maybe.
I mean, if you think about it, okay, here's my argument.
Make your case.
Okay, so based on what we know, on average, each bonus card can score you 4 to 5 points. So if you take that into consideration, a condor, especially if you play in early game, it's more of a 4 to 5 points bird that costs you no food, and you can play it in the forest or in the wetland to help you to build up, space as a filler bird. So I think now that I'm hearing myself saying it got to be at least at the bottom of B tier. For me.
I take the vulture every day of the week over the condor. It gives you the food early on that vulture, whereas this condor, okay, maybe it's 4 or 5 points, maybe even more if you get a nice bonus card. But it's that gamble early on, and it's a bird where I would only play out of desperation. If I had no other wetlands birds, or if I had no other forest birds, and I just needed something to get down. It's no food. I can get it down easily. It doesn't cost me any eggs either, and it will unlock something else. Whenever I'm activating that habitat. But I've got it in D tier. I know that you want to put it higher. Maybe we have to meet in the middle and put it in C tier.
I can't believe it. That's no way Condor is C tier, but I think, yeah, I'm gonna put it in top of C tier as a compromise here.
I'm still not happy with that. But,
again,
we could go on forever.
I know,
about this bird.
But we'll let other people decide. But on average, between the two of us, I think C tier. I mean, at most, it's not like I'm gonna put it any higher. At most, I was thinking maybe bottom of B tier, but I can live with top of C tier. I mean, again, just look at the voucher and condor. I think they gotta be pretty similar. But
I'd rather have the vulture.
All right, fine. All right, next we have the California quail. So you get to lay 1 egg on this bird.
Yep. So for me, I've got this in B tier.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's got some really good aspects to it. So you get eggs in the forest potentially, and there's not a whole lot of birds that do that.
Mm-hmm.
So early game, if you can get that down, you're getting eggs as you're getting food. So you can almost skip the grasslands and focus on building up your forest and your wetland habitats. It is expensive. It's 3 food for only 3 points, which I think brings it down a little bit. But yeah, I think it has to go in B tier.
Yeah, I think mid B tier. I mean, the ability to get eggs from forests is pretty good. That means you can kind of skip your grassland for a few turns, but like you say, the 3 food cost is kind of expensive. We do have other better birds that allow you to lay egg in the forest. So yeah, I think mid to low B tier here.
Yeah, I can go with that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next, we have the Canada Goose. So you get to discard 1 grain for 2 cards.
Yeah, so that functions the same as the whistling duck that we looked at earlier. The only difference being, this one can go in your grasslands as well as your wetlands. But for me, that's not really enough for me to keep it at the start of the game. This can be such a strong bird if you pair it with other birds that give you the food.
Yeah.
In order to discard, but again, early game you need that food more than the tuck, so I'm afraid it has to go in F tier.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. All right, next we have the canvas bag. So all players draw one card from the deck. Is a star nest in the wetland. So good utility, and the star nest. I'm trying to look what birds are similar to this.
Yeah, I think this is the first time that we've come across one of these. All players can draw a card from the deck power. There's a few birds that have this. So definitely something strong that you'd want to get down because it does get you extra cards, but you've got to bear in mind it's giving your opponent extra cards as well.
Right.
But yeah, four star nest spots is so strong.
Yeah.
Can help a lot with those end of round goals. And it is quite a flexible food cost. So yeah, I've got this in B tier. I'd say it's definitely stronger than Brant, just because it allows you to use it throughout the game to unlock more cards, whereas the Brant is obviously single use. But yeah, I'd say sort of mid to low B tier is fair.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Again, you have the control. Like you don't have to activate it if you sense that your opponent really need that card. So yeah, I think B tier sounds good to me. All right, next we have the Carolina Chickadee. So every time you activate it, you cash a grain onto this card, so you gain 1 point.
Yeah, and this is one of the stronger forest birds, so I think this has to go in A tier.
Ooh, A tier.
Absolutely for me. This is a if I want any forest bird that's one food, it's going to be a chickadee for me. I think it's better than the hunting birds because you're guaranteed the point, and I think that's the crucial thing, that you're always going to get the cash food. Whereas if you've got an owl or you've got a hawk or something that's re-rolling dice or looking at cards, you can't be sure whether you're going to get it. So I think absolutely it's a flexible food cost. There's quite a few birds that have the same power as this, so yeah, for me it has to go in A tier.
Yeah, I'm convinced. I was thinking top of B tier, but again, thinking of all the games that I play, I've seen a lot of games where if the chickadees show up in the tray, it will get taken almost immediately. And again, the guarantee point from activating your forest is nice. So yeah, I think A tier. Alright, next we have the Carolina Wren. So when played, you get to draw 2 cards, either from the tray or the deck, for 1 point.
Yeah, and I think this could be such an important bird early on, particularly if there is something in the tray that you've got your eye on.
Yeah.
You can play this, single food, gets you the card, and also it is that sort of first option as your forest bird, unlocking that extra food. I think B tier, I would probably say towards the upper end of B tier. It's maybe not quite as good as some of those other forest birds, just purely because it is single use. But yeah, you can't overlook that ability to get 2 cards instantly. I think that can be a really key thing at the start of the game to get a head start and get more cards, because your cards are so limited right at the start of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, another way I think about this card is, like you say, you have 1 bird in the forest, that's already good. And then you get 2 cards, and really the value of 2 cards is, 1, you save another turn that you would otherwise need to draw cards. And in early game, if you only have 1 bird in the wetland, you have to spend an egg to get the second card. So the value of this card definitely go beyond that 1 point.
Absolutely.
Yep, so definitely solid B tier bird here. Alright, next we have the Cassin Finch. Draw 2 and keep 1 bonus card for 4 points.
Yeah, and I think this is probably one of the stronger bonus card birds that you might want to keep at the start of the game. Again, it's not the best bird to get in your forest because it is a single use power.
Yeah.
And it's not going to get you anything as the game goes on. For me, I've put it in C tier, probably more towards the bottom end.
Okay.
But I think the food cost, you can keep that in your starting hand and get the Finch down really easily. And it's at least something, so it unlocks that extra food if you want to discard the cards.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna put it in top of D tier to kind of just group it with this bird that allow you to gain points and play in the forest but don't really have any utility. But the Finch, like you say, is nice because you can play it from your hand because of the food cost. So yeah, I'm gonna put it in top of D tier.
Yeah, I think it's slightly stronger than the Vireo for that reason. Obviously, the Vireo does have the star nest. I think the food cost for the Finch probably does put it slightly above
Yeah.
above the Vireo. But yeah, I think top of D2 is fair.
Yeah. All right. Next, we have the Cassin Sparrow. You get to lay 1 egg on any bird. So this is similar to another sparrow we have here. So we're gonna put them in the same tier.
They're basically the same bird, so yeah, they function the same.
Next, we have the Waxwing. So you get to tug a card from your hand and get a cherry.
Yeah, for me, probably F tier.
Yeah.
I just think it's so difficult to get this down because it's 2 cherries. That food cost is already a pain. But again, tucking cards, it does give you food, which maybe is better than the Blackbird giving you eggs at the at the start of the game. That food is useful, but yeah, it's very situational. There's not many games where I would play this bird. I think it only works if you have a really good card supply, but more often than not, at the start of the game, that's not something that you have, so I wouldn't look to play it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. In early game, you don't have that many cards. You just can't afford to tuck it and gain a cherry that, again, very, very specific. You might not even need it. And the food cost for 3 points. Yeah, I have to agree. Gotta be F. Not the birds you want to play in early game. Alright, we got the Cerulean Wobbler. Draw 2 and keep 1 bonus card. I think this is similar to the Cassin's Finch.
Yeah, it's almost identical.
Yep.
Slightly different food cost, but yeah, it functions the same, so I think it has to go in the same place.
Alright, the Longspur, another bonus card bird. I would say F tier.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think you could argue that it functions the same as the Woodcock. 3 food.
But grassland though.
It's grassland only, which I would say definitely you dock points for that because it's not a great grassland bird. It's not building up an engine.
Yeah,
if you're going to value a bonus card at 4 points, then that makes this a 9-point bird, which is the same as the Woodcock. So yeah, I don't know. I would say either bottom of D tier or top of F tier.
Yeah, I think for me again, this is the grassland. You typically just don't need a bird like a filler bird in the grassland in early game, and 3 food. Yeah, I think it is F tier for me. And again, just trying to think about all the games that I've played, I just rarely, almost never seen the Longspur being played in round 1.
No, it's not a bird that you'd look to keep, I think, if it was in your starting hand, and you certainly wouldn't pick it up from the tray if it was there.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put it in F tier.
Yeah.
All right, next we have our first S tier bird, the Chihuahuan Ravens, that allow you to discard 1 egg for 2 food. I don't think there's any argument here.
Are you sure about S tier? I was going to put in F tier. I think you're going to have to convince me on this one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how strong this bird really is.
I really don't know what to say, but other than if the only reason why you don't think it's in S tier is because you never played Wingspan before. I think it's one of those birds that if you have played a few games, you very quickly realize it got to be the S tier bird here.
Yeah, no, it was one of the strongest birds in the game. I don't think we need to say too much about this bird.
Yeah.
You just have to play a game against it once to realize how strong it is. So,
yeah. I guess just to make sure, like we also pointed out, this is also another bird where you have to be careful that you have to discard an egg from another bird to gain 2 food from your supply. So you have to at least play 2 birds to really make use of the brown power. But once you have it set up, it's just such a strong bird to have, where you can gain 2 food from your grassland and any food that you need. So S tier.
Such a strong bird. Yeah.
Yep. And next we have the Chimney Swift. We have a migratory bird, but it's slightly cheaper. It's 2 grub and you get a star nest.
It is slightly cheaper and you do get a star nest, but you still need 2 grubs, so you can't get it down straight away. You still have to go to the bird feeder. So I would still put it in F tier. I think it's slightly higher than some of the other migratory birds that we've got down there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is still an F tier bird. It's not really something I'd look to play.
Okay. I want to put it in desperate because I've just seen it being played, and I think I myself played before in situation where I just have no good birds that I can play. I think 2 grubs for Star Nest is a little bit more reasonable than the other migratory bird. I'm gonna put it in bottom of D tier.
I'll let you get away with that.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I'm gonna move it up a few notch, just because of the migratory. Like you can move it to forest and wetland. You know, it's a little bit better than the boring owl and the blackbird into of utility for early game. But again, really in desperate situation, you would play the swift.
Yeah. Only if you don't have anything better to play would you keep that. Yeah.
All right. Next, we have the chipping sparrow that allow you to lay eggs on any bird. This gotta be A tier.
Got to be A tier. It's similar to the quail, but it's so much stronger because it's 1 food instead of 3. So yeah, I think 9 times out of 10 you're going to play this in the forest, and you can get it down in your first turn for 1 food, and suddenly whenever you're gaining food, you're getting eggs. So yeah, such a strong bird, and it just allows you to avoid the grasslands really in that first round, which is you're saving yourself turns.
Yeah, and the great thing about the chipping sparrow is you get to lay this egg on any bird. So for the quill, you have to lay on the quill, but for the chipping sparrow, you can lay on other birds. So that can help you to manage your eggs for end of round goals. So it's a really strong bird for early game.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we have the Clark's Greed. So it's the brown power that allow you to draw 1 card, but you have to discard 1 at the end of your turn. 1 fish for Star Nest. So it gotta be
functions the same as the turn, I think. So it goes in the same kind of area.
It gotta be better than the turn because of 5 points.
It's 5 points. The turn is a bit more flexible in the food, so you can pay either a grub or a fish.
Ooh, yeah.
Which I would say puts them probably on a par. It's quite hard to split these. If I saw them both in the tray, I would maybe lean towards the turn, just because generally grubs are easy to get. So I might want to save a fish for something else. But yeah, they function almost the same throughout the game.
A tier.
Yeah.
All right. Next we have the Clark's Nutcracker. So this is the one where you can get a grain from the bird feeder if that's 1, or you can cash it for points. So this gotta be similar to Blue Jay, but a little bit more expensive, so maybe bump it down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean it functions the same as the acorn woodpecker that we looked right back at the start. It's slightly different because the food cost is a bit more flexible. But we've got the acorn woodpecker at the top of D tier, so for me, I think C tier at best for the nutcracker. I think that it is quite expensive to get down. It's probably not a bird I would pick up in the tray unless I had no other forest birds. I would definitely look at playing something else. So yeah, I would put it sort of lower end of C tier. It's not bad. It's not sort of complete desperation. But there are much stronger forest birds that you should play over this.
Yeah, I mean, come to think about it, it's another bird that I just don't remember the last time I played it because of the 3 food cost. So I have very mixed feeling about the Clark's Nutcracker and the acorn woodpecker here, just because now that I come to think about it, I just feel like even in a lot of desperate situation, I almost never consider it, but it could be just me personally. But
they work quite nicely in forest engines. So if you've got a lot of caching or tucking or hunting birds in your forest, I think this can be a nice addition to that, and certainly help you score a lot of points. But I think in most situations, if you are focusing on the grasslands, there are better forest birds to get down than this.
All right, I'm gonna put it in desperate situation for D tier.
Okay.
All right, next we have the common grackle. So another tuck and lay eggs bird, but you can play in any habitat for 2 food.
Yeah, I mean it's functionally identical to the bush tit.
Yep.
It's worth 1 more point and has a slightly more flexible food cost. I think you dock it points because it hasn't got the star nest and
Yeah.
it's just got fewer egg spaces. So if you are running something in the wetlands, often you'll find that you'll fill up on these egg spots quite quickly. That becomes a problem a lot sooner with the grackle than with the bush tit. So I think definitely B tier, but yeah, I put it slightly below the bush tit.
Okay. Next, we have the common loon. So I think this is similar to the bitten, where the player with the fewest bird draw 1 card. So
yeah, I think I'd put it in C tier alongside the bitten. I mean, it's maybe slightly better because it's only 1 point less, but you save a food.
Yeah.
And especially at the start of the game, being able to keep that extra food to get into second bird down, that can be really important. So yeah, the power works the same. But it's slightly stronger than the bitten.
All right. Next, we have the common mergangster, another wetland predator that roll the dice with fish. So this is similar to a hinga.
Yeah, I think you put it in the same sort of space, maybe slightly higher, just because it's got more egg spaces.
Yeah.
And the food cost is a bit more flexible. You know, for the ahinga and the skimmer, you need 2 fish, and at the start of the game, that could be quite difficult.
Yeah.
Whereas at least with the merganser, you can play a fish and some other food.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a desperation only. I think if this is the only wetland bird you can get your hands on, then go for it. But there are much better options.
Right. All right. Next, we have the common nighthawk. So it's another migratory bird for 2 grub, but a ground nest. So we're gonna put this probably below the swift here.
It has to go below the swift. Yeah, I think the only thing that saves the swift is the star nest.
Yeah.
And the nighthawk doesn't have it. So yeah, I think bottom of D tier at best for this bird. It's not great.
In general, I must say, whenever I have a game where I have to resort to playing migratory bird, I just rarely have a good games. I think one thing about migratory birds is you when you play a migratory birds, it really limit the sequence of your play, and it make your move a little bit predictable depending on where you move your birds. So yeah, I don't generally like playing a migratory bird starting hands.
No, I'm the same. I think I would much rather have brown powers that unlock extra food or extra cards or extra eggs. The migratory powers can be useful because by moving them you can often unlock that extra food or that extra card without having to discard something. But it's quite limited in its usefulness. So yeah, they're not great birds.
All right. And then next we have the common raven, another raven, but with the common raven you can play it in any habitat. So no doubt it's S tier.
It's the better raven.
Yep, I would have to agree with that.
It's worth an extra point. It's worth an extra point, and it can go anywhere. Most of the times you'll put it in the grasslands, but there are situations where it works in the wetlands as well. So yeah, I think this is absolutely top of S tier for me.
Yep, the flexibility make it a notch better than the Chihuahuan raven. Alright, so next we have the common yellow throat. So 1 grub, the brown power allows you to draw 2 cards, but you only discard 1 at the end of your turn. So effectively you gain 1 extra card every time you activate this brown power. Gotta be A tier for me.
Yeah, it has to be A tier. It works similarly to the Grebe and the Turn that we looked at before, except as you said, you get to look at 2 cards and keep 1 of them. So it's so strong at the start of the game to look at as many cards as possible and sort of cycle through those, keep the ones that are good and discard the ones that aren't. It's only 1 food, it's only 1 point, but it has got lots of egg spots. So yeah, this is absolutely one of the stronger wetland birds, and a must pick up from the tray for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely top of A tier. In terms of efficiency and utility, it's very similar to Restart because, again, once you have the yellow throat down, you get to draw 3 cards or 4 cards and then keep 2. So that's essentially the same as having two birds in the wetland already. So that's just really good efficiency there. Yep, top of A tier. Alright, next we have the Cooper's Hawk. So Predator looking at the deck. So this is similar to the Bar Owl. So...
Yeah, it's the same as the Owl. Same cost, same number of points, slightly different nest, but I don't think that makes too much of a difference. So yeah, I think top of B tier.
All right. Next, we have the Dark-Eyed Junco. This is the one where you tuck a card from your hand to get a grain. Again, is it F tier because of the power similar to the Waxwing?
I think I'd put this in D tier, and I think the
Okay.
only reason is because of the food cost. You know, when we looked at the Waxwing, we talked about the 2 cherries and how difficult that is to get at the start of the game. I think at least with the Junko, it is 2 different food. So yeah, I would put it slightly higher than the Blackbird because they're not great. You often find yourself being unable to afford to tuck cards at the start of the game because you just have so few. But I think at least this gives you a grain, which is more useful than the egg from the Blackbird, especially in those early rounds.
Yeah. Again, very desperate situation. In reality, when I think about my games, again, I've rarely seen Junko being played in the forest. Only in very few instances. But if you do play it, it is a good way to just kind of tuck the cards that you're not going to play and get that grain and get that point. So, yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Desperate. D tier. All right, next, what do we have? We have the Dick Sizzle, so another tuck and lay eggs birds that cost 3 food for 4 points. So... gotta be.
And I think for me that's what puts it in F tier.
Yeah.
It's the same power as the Blackbird, but that is just such an expensive bird. To play it in that first round, you're handicapping yourself because you're preventing yourself from playing other cards that, you know, will get you more utility in that first round. So yeah, I think probably around the same level as the Waxwing. I think that's fair.
Yep. Yeah, I'm gonna put it even. Yeah. Just because it's a grassland again, that's not the power you need in the grassland for early game.
No, definitely not.
All right, we have the Cormorant, where you discard 1 fish and tuck 2 cards. So I think we already talked about this. It's kind of similar to the White Pelican and the Whistling Duck. So
yeah, I think we can group all of these birds together. You know, they might be slightly different in the food cost or the nest type or, you know, what kind of food you discard, but functionally they work the same. And yeah, as I said before, you can't really afford to be discarding food early in the game. I think it's much more important to keep than to get the tucks.
Okay, here's my argument. Let's see if it moves you. I think the one thing that differentiates the Cormorant is because of the WoW food type, you can play it immediately from your hand. So would you say it's an option in desperate situation to have 1 bird down in the wetland?
I mean, you could play it on your first turn. You definitely wouldn't want to. That's my view.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be absolutely desperate.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's enough to put it in D tier for me. I think I'd almost rather have no wetland bird than have this and just go for something from the deck and just hope, because yeah, this is not a strong bird and it's not going to help you as the game goes on.
Yeah. Now that I hear you saying it, yeah, it's just such a pain when you have to spend 2 food for really, you know, not even mediocre, just not great wetland.
It's only 3 points.
Yeah.
It's only 3 points, and really I can't see it being beneficial to activate the power. So, you know, even if you do get some tuck cards behind it, you've had to sacrifice the fish, and yeah, you could definitely put it to better use than using this bird.
I'm convinced it's F tier. All right, here we have Downy Woodpecker. It's the one that allows you to play a second bird in the forest. So what do you think?
Yeah, this is a difficult one. It's very situational. I think these double birds in the first round, that's not traditionally when you'd look to play them.
Yeah.
I think kind of the key thing really is that if you're doing double bird, you need an egg, because to get that second bird down from your second column onwards. So you will have already had to spend a few turns doing other things before you can even think about using this bird. You know, it can be useful in situations where you've got an end of round goal or something like that. And you know, having more birds in your forest is never a bad thing.
Yeah.
For me, I put it in D tier. I think there are situations where it could potentially be a C tier bird, but for the most part, it's a desperation play. It's not something I'd look to keep or pick up from the tray.
Yeah. Let me try to think about this. So I'm thinking more about the stretch of like whole round 1. You know, the ability to play 2 bird in the forest is good. That sets you up immediately. I think thinking about this, yeah, I think now that I look at some of the birds in D tier, you know, like the Cassin Finch and Warbler are definitely better than the Woodpecker.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it's a bird
D-tier.
you might play towards the end of round 1. You certainly wouldn't be able to get it down early on.
Yeah.
You know, maybe in that last action or something if you're trying to, you know, go for the end of round goal. But
Yeah.
it's not something you really look to play normally.
Yeah, I
In
agree.
that first round.
Yeah, and the setup that you need eggs to play it. Okay,
Exactly.
I'm convinced.
Good.
Next, we have the bluebird. It's the same power that allow you to play a second bird, this time in grassland, and it costs 2 food. So this gotta be F tier then.
Yeah, it functions the same as the woodpecker, but I think it's weaker in the food cost.
Yeah.
And building up your grasslands with a bird that doesn't do anything, generally not something you look to do in that first round. So yeah, I think this has to go in F tier.
Yep. All right. Next, we have the Eastern Kingbird. So this has a pink power that gives you a grub if another player play a bird in the forest. I'm thinking it's kind of like a filler bird, but you can also potentially get a free food in early games. So I kind of want to put it in the same category as Black Vulture. What do you think?
Yeah, I think C tier is fair for this one. You know, you can almost always count on getting a few grubs from this because you know that other players will be wanting to build up their grasslands. And you know, as with all the other pink powers, it scales with the more players you've got. So you know, if you're playing a 5-player game, this could easily be B or even A tier just from the number of grubs that you'll get from it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it, like you said, it's flexible. You can put it in your forest or in your wetlands, depending on where it needs to go. And certainly you can count on a few grubs early on as other players build up their forest as well.
All right, so next we have the Eastern Phoebe. So this is the one that allow you when you activate it, all player gain 1 grub from the supply, 1 food for star nests.
Yep.
A tier.
I will dedicate this to my good friend Geest. A tier. His
Absolutely
favorite bird
A-tier.
for good reason. This is such a strong bird. It's 1 food for 3 points, 4 nest spots, 4 star nest spots, and 3 grubs in any habitat. Absolutely, it's one of the strongest birds in the game, and if I see this in my starting hand, I can breathe a sigh of relief because I think okay, I've got a chance here. This is gonna be a good game.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the birds that you're always gonna be happy to see. All right. Next, we have the Eastern Screech Owl, another predator with rolling hunting powers. So where do we put those? Here, B tier with the hawk.
Yeah, I think it goes with the hawk.
All right.
Functions basically the same. It's maybe slightly stronger because you can use a grub instead of a rodent. But I think that gets it maybe 1 space higher, and certainly no more than that.
All right. Next, we have the Ferruginous Hawk, another predator that roll the dice for rodent, but this time it's grassland for 2 rodent. For me, it's F tier.
Yeah, it's the same as a kestrel, except it's worse.
Yeah.
Because it needs two rodents.
Yeah.
There's 1 more point, but it's not bird you should keep.
Yeah.
Maybe if you've got rodentologist or falconer,
Yeah.
it gives you those extra points from the bonus card, but it's not something that you build an engine around.
It still slow you down even with those bonus card.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we have the fish crow. This is similar to the American crow, but it's 2 food. You get 2 extra point. So still A tier, but not as good.
Yeah, it's still A tier. It's slightly worse than the crow because it does need that extra food. Obviously, you do get 2 extra points, but it functions the same as the crow. It goes in any habitat, and it will give you any food you want for an egg. So I think definitely A tier, but slightly below the crow.
Yeah. All right. Next, we have the foster turn. Allow you to draw 1, but you have to discard 1. I think that's similar to the black turn.
Yeah, it's basically identical. Has the same food cost, points, nest, and everything. So I think it goes alongside the black turn.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
This
up in A tier.
the tier list is getting really long. I have to scroll through all the things, but
There's a lot of birds, to get
it's a
through.
lot of birds at the end. Yeah, I think we're almost halfway through. So let's see. Next, we have the Franklin Skull, which allow you to discard 1/8 to draw 2 cards. I mean, no question, this is gonna be S tier.
Yep. I think the only question is, does it go above or below the Ravens?
For me, it definitely go above the Raven.
Yep.
I think for me, it's the flexible setup because you don't need a second bird to support this bird, and the star nest, and another things that I think about is as we have seen, there's so many birds that give you food in the grassland, but there are not any bird that give you cards in the grassland. I think that's decidedly put Franklin's Goal above the Raven.
Yeah, I think I have to agree. If you compare the gull with, even one of the crows or a hummingbird or a phoebe or something like that, that's such a strong setup. And I think the other thing for me is that actually with the gull, you can have quite a weak forest in the sense that if you only have one bird, you're going to be getting so many cards that you can afford to discard a lot. To get those extra food. So yeah, I think I would take the gull over the raven, every day of the week. But I'm still not going to complain if I get a raven.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. We have another S tier bird. No surprise there. All right, next we have the Golden Eagle, another hunter. I think this is probably the best hunting power in the game, where you look at the deck and you're looking for a bird that's less than 100 centimeter, but this costs 3 rodent. So
yeah, you're right. The hunting power is strong, and you can definitely count on points on this. But 3 rodents, one nest spot. I think F tier.
F tier, yeah.
Yeah, it's not something, even out of desperation, if you keep this, it's going to take you at least 2 turns, and that requires 2 rodents in the feeder, and that's so unlikely at the start of the game. So, you cannot rely on this as being your first forest or your first grassland or wetland bird, because it's just going to take way too long to get the food for it.
I agree. All right, next we have Grasshopper Sparrow. So this allows you to lay 1 eggs on any bird, and they only cost 1 food. So gotta be better than the other sparrow that we have seen.
Yeah, so we've got the Cassin Sparrow and the Bed Sparrow there, sort of middle of tier C.
Right.
Absolutely, this is a stronger bird than that, because it's only 1 less point, but you save the food. I would even go as far as putting this in B tier, I think, just because it is so cheap and so easy to get down. And it unlocks that extra egg from the brown power that it's a good start to an engine, I think, the Grasshopper Sparrow.
Yeah now that you mention it, it because of the 1 food cost, I also feel like I want to bump it up a little bit, maybe not all the way to B tier, but definitely kind of top of C tier here. And I think that's one way that I typically think about the value of 1 food in early game too, because 1 food, you can play a bird that score you 4 or 5 points, or engine bird that can really build up your game. So yeah, even though it's only 1 food, it seems small, but I think it really differentiates a lot of the birds here.
Yeah, it's a strong bird, and it has that flexible cost of 1 grub or 1 seed. And getting that from the bird feed is certainly not going to be a problem.
Yeah. Next, we have the gray catbird. So it allows you to repeat a brown power of another bird in the same habitat. For me, this is F tier.
Yeah, I found this quite difficult to rank, because in theory, this is the strongest bird in the game, because it can be any other bird that you have. So it pairs nicely with almost any other bird in any habitat. But yeah, it's early game, so difficult to get down.
Yeah.
Those two cherries really put me off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because it relies on other birds, I think if you have to keep that much food to play the catbird, you're limiting how much food you can keep to play other birds. So this is a bird that doesn't do anything on its own. You need to have built something up around it. So certainly rounds 2, 3, and 4, this is a really strong bird. But at the start of the game, it's not something I wouldn't keep it. I'd rather keep an extra food over this bird.
Yep, you nail it. I think this is going to be a top tier for mid game and late game, but yeah, definitely not going to make it for early game. All right, next we have the Great Blue Heron, a double bird that allow you to play another bird in the wetland. So I think this kind of go with the Eastern Bluebird.
Yeah, I'd put it in the same sort of area as those other double birds. Maybe slightly higher because it can help build your
Grassland.
wetlands.
Oh, wetland, yes.
Rather than the bluebird being in the grassland. But yeah, again, it's kind of similar to the catbird. If you're looking at the kind of birds you want to be drawing in rounds 3 and 4, absolutely the Great Blue Heron is one of those. But yeah, at the start of the game, it's not something that you'd look to keep or take from the tray.
Yep. All right, next we have the Great Crested Flycatcher. So when activated, you get a grub from the bird feeder if that's 1. So that is kind of similar to something I was thinking about. Maybe like the blue jay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean for me, I would put it higher.
Okay.
Than the blue jay. I would say it maybe sneaks into A tier, but at the very least, it's going to be top of B tier.
Yeah.
It's 5 points for 2 food, which is already strong in itself. But it gives you that ability to get extra grubs. The weakness is that it's grubs on the bird feeder. So if you get unlucky with a re-roll, or there's just not enough in the feeder, then you sometimes find yourself missing this power. But I think over the course of the game, it will unlock itself enough times to be worth playing. So yeah, I think absolutely top end of B tier I think is fair for this bird.
Yeah, I think I can agree with top of B tier because of the food cost that you can play immediately. So that definitely put it above the Oreo, and you get the grub, which is more useful than a cherry.
Yeah, I mean you can almost do a direct comparison between this and the red start. Because, it's the same food cost. It's very similar in terms of the point value. But the red start, you take any food you want from the bird feeder, whereas this is limited to just grubs. So I think it's quite easy to see the difference between those birds and why this sort of bird is B tier, whereas the red start has to go in A tier.
Yep, absolutely. All right, next we have the Great Egret. It's similar to the heron. You get to play a second bird in the wetland, but it costs even more. So
yeah, I think it's same tier as heron, but probably slightly lower, just because that food cost is so difficult to get.
Yeah, rarely you run into situation where you can afford to play that in early game. All right, next we have the Great Horned Owl, another great hunting power, but it costs 3 rodent. But this time you can play in the forest.
I think it functions the same as the golden eagle that we looked at before. Same food cost, same power, different habitat. But yeah, I think it's got to be F tier. It's so difficult to get that food at the start of the game that it's not really the kind of bird that you'd look to get down in your forest, in those first couple of rounds.
Yep, agree. So again, I couldn't think of any desperate situation where I would consider playing Great Horned Owl, so F tier. All right, next we got the Greater Prairie Chicken. So you get to draw 2 bonus and keep 1. I think that's basically the same bird as the Longspur.
Yeah, it's almost identical. I think the food cost might even be the same. At the very least, it's the same sort of food, and yeah, the power is the same. It's not really the kind of bird you look to build up an engine with.
All right. I think that brings us to the halfway point of all the birds that we're looking at. So I think we're gonna wrap this up so that it doesn't turn into a 5 hours video. But definitely stay tuned for part 2 of this tier list. And I would like to thank Flan again for doing this with me. It was a pleasure.
No worries. Thanks for having me. And yeah, see you again in part 2.
All right. Stay tuned, people. All right. What do you think? 2 hours. God. I'm losing my voice here.